Welcome back to the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Preparis. Not joining me this week is Brenna Calvert. This episode is brought to you by Harbinger Fitness. If you're looking for weight training apparel, belts, lifting straps, wrist wraps, weight vests, or fat bar grips to work on your grip strength training, head over to harbingerfitness.com and pick some of those up. When we started this podcast a couple months ago, we said there was like three main reasons we're doing it. You know, we don't want to be in competition with the other OCR podcasts because there's some great ones out there, like Overcome and Run and Dirt in Your Skirt. But we did want to highlight a couple different things. One, we wanted to give back to the OCR community. Two, we wanted to highlight smaller race series. And both of those, I think we've been doing really well since the beginning. And the third thing we wanted to do was bring in athletes from other sports. And we haven't been doing as good of a job of that as I would have liked. We did have Noah Kaufman from Ninja Warrior on, so that's it's basically the same thing as OCR. And we did have Logan Nagel on, who is on the show The Selection, talking about some mental toughness stuff. However, finally, I would say we legitimately are crossing over into a new sport and talking about a new topic. So with that, we have Kalle Beck on the show. He's a strongman who's been competing in strongman competitions since 2007. His competitive highlights include winning California's Strongest Man, along with multiple state championships. He's got 3 top 10 finishes at nationals, 2 invites to Arnold World Championships, including a 6th place in 2013. And in 2014, Kalle founded StartingStrongman.com, which has turned into one of the top resources for strongman training. Also hosts a podcast along the same name. So, Kalle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's the Strong Talk podcast I host, but and then we just interview other strongman competitors and all that. But I appreciate it. I've noticed I've had some friends that also do strongman and do some OCR as well, and they've told me that they'll be running along and they'll see some implements that seem somewhat familiar. So I think there's some good overlap there. And I actually kind of want to pick your brain a little bit on what all is what kind of odd objects like that you see in those races, just so I learn a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, kind of some of you may be listening and thinking, why do we have a strongman on the podcast? So the first main reason is grip strength training. Intensity and duration I think are somewhat comparable to between OCR and strongman, although strongman's doing like ridiculous weights. We're doing what feels like a lot of weight for us, but it's probably not that much. 2 is kind of draw some comparisons between the two sports, kind of the progression and how they both kind of are niche sports, like we said. And then 3, just kind of see where the future's taking us. All right. So let's start off with just, for those of our listeners who are unaware, I know I watch World's Strongest Man on TV pretty much every Christmas, but that's about it. So give us like an overview of strongman. Like, what's a typical event, and what are the typical sub events within each competition?
Sure. I think I think pretty much everyone that's been alive and is for the past 40 years has seen World's Strongest Man at some point, and that's the only real glimpse into what strongman is. And the main thing to say is that there is an amateur level of the sport, from novice all the way up. I'm sure similar to how your sport is. There's a whole different levels, and there's also weight classes. So for myself, I've competed as a lightweight, which is 175 pounds, which is a very very average kind of weight, and and there's also a 150-pound class, and then there's weight classes for the women all the way down to 140, 125, or 120, I think. So just want to put it out there for anyone that there is overlap, and that you don't have to be 6'5" and 350 pounds to do it. That would be the main thing that people should take away from this. So how an event is generally constructed is most amateur level one-day competitions are going to be 5 events, and you're going to have, and I put, and they're odd objects, right? So World's Strongest Man, it's a weird sport because it was a TV show first that evolved into a sport, which is unusual. Usually sports are, we're a sport, and then how do we get on television? It went the opposite direction. It's like, how can we get some strong people all together and see who's the strongest, doing various feats of strength that are unique and visually appealing. So they're odd objects. So instead of using like a typical barbell setup, you're going to do something like it's going to be a thicker bar, or that's the size of a Coke can, like an axle with tires on the end, or we're just going to have like a rough cut log. So that's mainly the gist of the sport, is making things, visually making feats of strength relatable to the general public. Just like if you guys are, OCR I think is a little different than just out trail running. You got to make stuff to make it seem, even more impressive to the general public, like scaling a big old wall or other stuff. But how, of course, after that there becomes a formula of how do you actually test who is the strongest through multiple disciplines. So generally an amateur contest that's one day is going to have 5 events, and they fall into a couple of classes in each event. There's going to be some sort of ground overhead where you're going to pick up an object off of the floor and put it over your head, in any fashion, like a clean and jerk or a push press, etc. And that's going to be any number of implements, from a giant dumbbell that you lift with one arm to, like I said, a big old log or axle with tires. It could be a block. It could be a fire hydrant. That's the great thing about it. Like you just think of something that would be hard to do, and it can become an event. There's going to be some sort of deadlift, which is pretty self-explanatory, just picking any sort of object off of the floor and standing up, hips locked. And that could be the back of a car, an axle, various heights. There's no standardization compared to other barbell or strength sports like powerlifting or weightlifting, etc. It's just there's themes, of course, but there's no standardization. There's going to be some sort of moving event. If you guys ever do like a farmer's walk or like a yoke carry, like either something on your back or holding in your arms, in your hands, and that's usually going to be contested for time. Generally, it's a 50 to 100 foot course. That's about it. So that's going to be a moving event. There's going to be medleys, which is going to be multiple events that you have to do in a row, which is going to be and that could be like a sandbag, Atlas stone, and depending on what weight class for men, it's going to be somewhere around like 200 to 350 pounds each, and doing like 4 implements. And then there's going to be some sort of loading event, which is probably the most iconic. Is when I say loading, it's picking an object up and putting it onto or over a platform. And the most iconic, of course, is Atlas stones, but that could be anything as well. And there's other variations in there, like throwing events, like a keg toss or truck pull. But that's pretty much the meat of it. What you're gonna see at most, 90% of amateur contests are going to be constructed in that fashion, with some variation of those standard tests of strength.
Gotcha. And we're gonna hone in on the farmer's walk and kind of grip strength stuff in a minute. But I know like World's Strongest Man has a lot more moving stuff, and like the Arnold Classic is more like static strength. Is that correct?
Yeah, generally the Arnold Classic is in Ohio every year, and that's the heaviest strongman contest there is. Over time, historically, World's Strongest Man has been a little bit lighter, with more athletic events like farmer's walk, or like a big old shield carry where you just have, or they had to carry like a stone that's shaped like Africa as far as they could, that weighs 400 pounds, and you got to carry it 200, 300 feet in front of you in the crooks of your arm. Like events like that, they're a little bit more athletic, a little bit more dynamic, where the Arnold's just like, let's make this really heavy, and no one's walking more than 30 feet with an implement. We're talking 1,500 pound yoke on your back. But this year they just announced the events for Worlds, and it's actually very static. So that line's getting blurred a little bit more, where it actually has it has a Viking press, a deadlift, and a squat all in the finals. So that's 3 out of 6 events are all static stationary lifts. But yeah, historically, generally speaking, that's been the case.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So let's say someone's prepping for something like the Arnold or World Strongest Man or an amateur one, whatever. What does like a typical training week look like? How many days a week are you lifting? How many are kind of more barbell focused, or how many are very specific, like lifting Atlas stones, stuff like that? Kind of take us through a week.
Yeah, if the higher up you get in the sport and the higher level, the closer you get to a contest, the more specific you're going to want your training. So like Brian Shaw, let's say Worlds is in a couple of weeks at this point. He's probably, Brian Shaw, current World's Strongest Man, he's probably just practicing a couple of the events every day at this point. But for, the average competitor, they still have to build up that base strength, and they're not a full-time athlete. So it's harder to set up all the event training, and most people, it's changing now that there's more and more access to implements and events, but most people generally do about 3 gym days a week, and then an event day on Saturday or Sunday when they have more time and everyone gets together as a group. If you can get more practice with implements, that helps. But how I set up a training program is going to be, there's going to be, some sort of overhead, vertical pressing and pulling. So that'll be like my overhead day, like work on log clean and press, some pull-ups, some shoulder accessory stuff, upper back movements, stuff like that. Some sort of deadlift, back hamstring day, throwing squats in there as well. And I like a second press day just for actually still utilizing bench press, because I feel it builds upper body strength a lot. And then generally I'll throw squats in with events. So we'll do maybe some front squats, some walking lunges, then some farmers or yoke carry, then like a moving event. That's a very rough layout of like a training program for a strongman. And because there's so many different disciplines and skills you have to work on, but there's generalities. You kind of know what's going to be the most specific lifts that kind of carry over to everything else. So we're going to focus on that the most, and for the most part. And as things close in closer to contest, you kind of hone in and do more events and less gym lifts. So it might combine squats and deadlifts, or sometimes even just stop squatting for a couple of weeks altogether and do more yoke runs and more Atlas stones, etc. Like 4 weeks out of a contest.
Gotcha. I know. So most of your events like really don't exceed a minute, but I know like the medley and the loading event, and some of the like the yoke carries involves essentially cardio plus strength. Do you guys do any cardio typically, or you just kind of use the specific training for doing the yoke carry or doing those loading events as your cardio?
I think it's smart to do some cardio. That's been a trend lately, as people continue to do sports, you kind of learn that there is just getting the adaptations from low intensity cardio, all the benefits that go with that. Of course, I work with Complete Human Performance, coaching with them, and Alex Viata. Him and his team, I've learned a lot on that aspect of incorporating cardio into my own training and my clients' training, and I've seen big benefits. So, but it doesn't have to be a lot, especially if you're talking a lot of people that they're big guys, 300+ pound guy. You could just, I'm telling them like, we're starting out, we're doing 15 minutes of walking 3 times a week. It's nothing intense. It's not taking away anything else, but over time, that's going to help build a better aerobic base. Because what people don't understand, these are long days. I just got back from helping my good friend Robert Oberst, who's a pro strongman, compete in a show out in North Carolina, in Charlotte. And he's it's only ends up being 3 minutes of total work, but we're out there for 9 hours. He's deadlifting over 800 pounds and lifting close to 300 pounds with one arm over his head, and doing some brutal medleys in there too. So you want to make sure that you still have that endurance and stamina, and that you're 100% recovered in between events. And he's incorporated a lot of longer walks and some more traditional cardio in his training recently, and dropped about 50, 60 pounds. And that was the biggest change I saw in him in between events. Was used to have that, you could tell their blood pressure is still really high after events, and it takes longer for everything to settle back to normal. He's sweating a lot, is how it would be, before he lost the weight and doing the cardio. And now he just looked like we just have a conversation shortly after. He just went through, 60 seconds of max effort in an event, and then he's still 100, he wasn't waning by the end of the day. So that's the main reason we're incorporating cardio into training. I feel a lot more strongman should.
Gotcha. Yeah, he's a huge dude. I met him at it was like Arnold Classic 2000. I want to say 12. He was manning one of the booths. I can't remember, maybe for a supplement company or something. He's like
probably GAT, probably a sponsor.
Yeah, probably. How tall is he?
He's about 6'7", 6'8", depends on who he's trying to impress. But yeah, he's a big guy.
I'm 5'6".
Yeah, we train together.
Yeah,
exactly.
I remember walking around the festival and being like, that man is a giant. So.
Yeah, man. I'm 5'7" as well, and I remember the first time I trained with him, he didn't know what strongman really was. It was this like second training day ever, and I saw him like put a 340-pound log over his head, and I was like, hey, like that's not normal. So pretty much since, we're best friends, and help each other out a lot, and we bounce. I wouldn't say I train him, but we bounce ideas off each other, and like I said, I go to events to help him out. But that kind of reiterates that strongman's pretty much it is for everyone. Like I'm 5'7", 190, 200 pounds, and he was at one point 420 pounds at 6'8". And we still train together, and both learn from each other.
Wow.
He still never beat me in a car deadlift, but
closer, you're a little closer to the ground. Helps with the leverage.
Yeah, hey man, I'll take the one event in strongman that it pays to be short in. I'll take it. And every other event, it generally it's a tall man's sport. A big tall man's sport for the most part. But if I can have an advantage in one thing, I'm gonna hold on to it.
Yeah, when I was lifting heavy, my deadlift was well above average compared to like my bench and my squat. Like those two were kind of weak, and my deadlift was like super high. I was like, oh, so benefit of being short, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, deadlift it's more limb length, but with a car deadlift, it's side handle, so it's less of a deadlift, more like a leg press, hack squat, like weird.
Oh, interesting.
Weird lift, so it's a lot of quads. So it's even more beneficial to be short on that one. Where with deadlift, you just want your proportions to be long, But yeah, if you can, it doesn't matter if your bench sucks. If you can deadlift, that's kind of like the truest test of strength, in my opinion. So as long as you got a good deadlift.
Yeah, I've reduced. I don't deadlift much anymore with obstacle course racing. I just end up training so much specific stuff for that it's kind of fallen by the wayside. But it used to be my favorite workout day of the week.
Yeah, it's so taxing on your recovery that it doesn't make too much sense for other sports, especially if you're already pretty proficient. You have enough back strength and everything else for your specific demands that you want your body to do. There's even just being semi-retired or whatever the hell I am right now, every time I deadlift, then I kind of have that feeling for like the next 3 days. I'm like, I should have just done something easier. But it's still fun to pull 3 times your body weight or something at some point.
Yeah. That being said, I think for OCR athletes who are in the process of building strength and they don't have that strong base, I think there's a lot of value in deadlifting, especially for things like tire flips. Like, I mean, that that translates very well. You just kind of have to adjust some of the so your hand positioning and kind of work on your form a little bit. But
yeah, being able to pick heavy things up off the floor carries over to a lot of things in a lot of sports in life. But that's why that was everyone cherry picks things when you say it. I'm not saying you are. I'm saying when people are listening, that was the point when I said when you're already proficient enough in that strength, there's not much more point to keep building on that. But yeah, if you have no strength training background, then getting some more deadlifting strength is going to help pretty much everyone. But it's the same thing, even like if we're talking about cardio for strongman, if we don't need to go out and run a half marathon, but we should be able to make it up some stairs without wanting to pass out and take a break halfway. Is probably going to be beneficial. You just need to have some base level
gotcha.
to carry over into your other strengths.
Okay, so for obstacle course racing, I mean I think the main crossover points. I mean, we do sandbag carries and stuff like that, but they're a lot longer in duration than something like your loading race. Like our sandbag carries can be 5 to 20 minutes. Depending on how fast you're moving. But a lot of our obstacles, especially in some race series, are mandatory completion. So like grip strength has become kind of like besides being able to run fast, probably the second most important thing is grip strength. And usually it's crossing these rigs, so like there'll be rings and ropes and fat monkey bars and nunchucks and dangling ropes or a bunch of little ropes. So it's all about grip strength and body weight proportional to grip strength. So I know you guys have farmers carries as one of your event, and we had a series called Battle Frog that used to do jerry can carries. So it's essentially a farmer's carry. Significantly lighter weight. I mean, it's like, I guess 30 pounds in each hand. But it's fairly long. It could be like a quarter mile and maybe uphill or something like that. So what do you?
Yeah,
what do strongmen? So what do strongmen? Let's say like you have a strongman and he's pretty proficient in a lot of the other strength lifts, but he is not doing well in farmer's carry. Like what would some tips you'd give him to improve?
Yeah, that was me for a long time. I was very strong statically for my weight class, being a lightweight. But man, we have to, even as a lightweight, we'd have to carry sometimes 280, near 300 pounds in each hand for 60 feet. And if you can't complete it, then you're leaving a lot of points on the table. And what I'd say to myself was, I wish I was born with bigger hands. It's a very genetic thing. If you have everyone I know that has an amazing grip, for the most part, has these giant, giant paws. Because it's just a better leverage, just like we're talking about in deadlift. But what I found that actually did help me was I was training my grip too much, which it seems counterproductive, and I wouldn't say that that's the best advice for everyone. But I struggled for years and years to get my grip up to par, and eventually was able to walk, with like 320-pound farmers for 50 feet in training, and I think 280 or so in a contest at one point. So and I used to drop 220 pounds and not be able to complete it. So the main, and what I found was just not training it so often. I went crazy. Okay, I need to buy grip, Captains of Crush grippers. I need to train pinch grip after this workout, then this, and then I found that my grip was always taxed. Or don't wear straps on any of my deadlifts. And as soon as I started training, I just basically do heavy farmer's walks. I feel like grip's very specific. So if the only grip test I'm going to have is farmer's walks, then my grip is going to be that's how I need to train my grip. It's very different between crushing strength, crushing strength like a gripper, or having to squeeze something very hard one time where I need static hold. I need to be and it seems like that's the same for OCR, is that you need to be able to hold on to something for a long time.
I'd say most rigs you can cross in under a minute.
But are you constantly opening and closing your hand on those implements?
Yeah,
or
so
is it
there's 16 different holds to cross the rig. So, like, you'll go from a rope to a ring to like I said, nunchuck to another rope to another ring to a bar.
Sure.
So a lot of opening and closing. Like I said, it takes a minute if you're moving slow. At least I think so. It probably takes like 30 seconds most of the time to cross the actual rig.
Okay, yeah, so that's less, like, that's going to be very different how you want to train that compared to, walking for 15 minutes with some jerry cans, which is going to be very static and endurance. For that, I'd just do more volume on, those specific things. Even it seems like pull-ups, with the various kind of, grips that you're going to use, like, from ropes or towels, and just build up that strength. Because, of course, you're crossing, so you're also contracting and, pulling up. Crossing something, you have to keep yourself. You don't want to be just dangling there, I imagine. So I'd say just a lot of pull-ups, but it's probably important also to rest your grip for 2 weeks before you have a big race, because I feel like that's what I always did is I'd build and build and build my grip strength up, and then and make sure to take 2 or 3 weeks off from heavy grip training, and then on that day my grip would feel a lot stronger. As I feel like it especially if you're not one of those people that are born with a great grip and big hands, it takes a while to recover from. Like, whatever lifts or kind of skills you're not very good at seem to be harder on your body. Like, you can see some people that can deadlift multiple times a week, but they have perfect leverages. So, that would be the main thing, is to actually rest a little bit on like, definitely don't train it like a very hard or heavy, like a week or so before, and focus more on stuff that would be a little faster to recover from. But grip being very specific, trains specifically for that, like different holds, different ways you're doing it, like opening and closing your hands. Like, that's what I was saying, like, I don't feel like grippers carry it over very well to me doing farmer's walk. To me doing farmer's walks. And also I feel like that crushing something and it automatically is trying to open up your hand, it almost trains yourself to let go, if that makes sense. So just, I've found when I describe training grip for a strongman, I say to hold on to heavy things for a long time, because that's what we're doing, is we're doing static holds for the most part. Even if we're moving with them, our grip, the main thing is just not drop. So train your grip in that manner. I could see some benefit of doing some gripper work, but again, I think they're taxing, so just be wary of it. I like holds with them, but not like 1 rep max, like trying to close the heaviest gripper you can.
Gotcha. Okay, I think some pretty solid advice there, specificity, and also making sure you taper in time for races, just like we would with running, stuff like that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So any of your episodes on your Strongman podcast talk about grip strength training at all? Are there any like focused ones?
I have a couple videos on my YouTube channel about grip. I have one on how to set your grip on farmer's walk, which I think is important. Where I don't think it would be as important when you're not doing maximal weights like that, but with like a really heavy farmer's carry, just learning to put it like deep inside my palm instead of holding it in my finger helped a lot. So just thinking about that, it hurts, but the more surface area you're crushing whatever you're holding on to with, and the deeper you have it set in your palm instead of in your fingers, the stronger grip you're going to have. But yeah, I probably should have someone on that's actually a grip specialist in the sport, because there's specific grip competitions themselves, like Ode Haugen is always promoting. He's a legendary strength athlete from Norway that lives in Southern California now, and he's like 70 and still lifting a 2-inch axle with over 400 pounds with double overhand and no straps, which is I think the most I ever did was like 280 or 300, so it's a ton of weight. And yeah, I think he's probably gonna get mad if I said 400. I think he's doing over 5. So
you're familiar with the website Iron Mind? I'm assuming.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
They have a lot of good products on.
Yep. when I initially, started getting into OCR, I looked to them for a lot of their grip strength training stuff, and I know they have like their cube concept, which covers the different types of grip strength, like crushing and pinching and open hand and closed hand. So I know I kind of, as I went through trying to improve my own grip strength, I would try to pick one of those aspects and try to focus on it per workout, and then take rest days. So I don't know. I think it's valuable because in OCR, again, sometimes you're grabbing, a lot of times you're grabbing monkey bars, but I mean, I've grabbed so many bars in my lifetime between, strength training and then just obstacle racing. Like, if it's just a regular bar, like, I'm not going to let go. My grip is good enough that it's going to latch onto that thing and it's going to hold on. But the, nunchucks where my grip is vertical, or maybe a very fat monkey bar that I'm not used to, I think that's where, I've been challenged in the past, and that's where I think a lot of athletes kind of hit a sticking point, because they're only training on skinny pull-up bars, and they're not training on anything fat or awkward or pointed in the wrong direction. So.
Yeah, it completely changes how it tests your grip depending on the size. Just even like we see the difference even with just farmers walks. Like I just promoted California's Strongest Woman, and we had a farmers walk, and people were wondering why we had it so light compared to like what they did, and they didn't realize the handles are just a tiny bit bigger. They're kind of slick because they had powder coating on them. They weren't just bare metal, and little changes like that can make all the difference. And you saw people are slipping out of their hands just because they were a quarter inch bigger than what they're training on. So it's like strongman's not a standardized sport, and I believe OCR isn't either.
Not.
So you don't want to standardize your training like you would if you're doing powerlifting, where the specs of what you're going to be, your competition's going to be. It's going to be this type of plates, this type of platform, this type of squat rack, this type of bar. You kind of know, so you have to train more varied and be ready for everything. The more specific you keep your training, then you're not going to be prepared if there's slight deviations on the equipment that you encounter.
I think that's very, very good point. We're part of our, I'd say, us as a community or as a sport is having like a big push to get into the Olympics. There's kind of that, but the problem with that is if you try to get into the Olympics, you're gonna have to standardize everything, right? So everything has to be repeatable and measurable, and it'll probably have to be on a track, and there'll only be the monkey bars will be X number of feet long with Y number of rungs, and there really won't be any variation. But the way the sport is now, and the thing I love about it is there's just so much variability. I mean, you go to one race and the obstacles are essentially super easy. Like a warrior dash, you can essentially just basically a runner can show up to a warrior dash and win. Versus their Series I race for Conquer the Gauntlet, has a pegboard in the middle of their obstacle course, which most athletes can't do a pegboard. It's hard unless you specifically train for that. So.
Sure. Yeah, I think people get too wrapped up inside, and they kind of forget what drew them to the sport in the first place. Like, drawing the comparison between powerlifting and strongman or weightlifting, I feel like it's kind of your mindset. Like, lots of people like everything to be put in neat little boxes, and they kind of know what it's going to be, and then that's just the whole reason I fell in love with strongman is there was just always something new. Like, as soon as I got really good at something, there's a whole new twist. I'm like, well, crap, this event that just showed up, I'm horrible at it, so I got to figure it out. And then you go, and it's just not standard. So, yeah, it doesn't fit in the Olympics. And, of course, that same kind of talk goes on in, our community as well. And I think it's just kind of silly. If you look at, like, weightlifting, it's like I love it. I think it's beautiful. But for me, like, it's like watching, like, golf. Everyone has to be quiet. Like, I've trained in weightlifting gyms, and, like, I have friends that do OCR and stuff, and it seems like that's kind of the appeal. You can wear whatever you want. You dress up in different costumes to some extent. That's not going to be part of the sport if you want it to go that route and become more professional and be considered, like an Olympic sport. And the same with strongman. Like, I like that, a guy gets done. I was just at a contest. He got done deadlifting, tore his shirt off, and threw in the crowd. Like, that's not going to happen if it's in the Olympics.
Right. Yeah. So you said earlier, so World's Strongest Man, the like kind of the TV series was kind of the start of the sport. And I know there's other. I think it's similar to obstacle course racing. So I've heard of like Giants Live. Is there?
Sure.
Are there multiple brands that feed into World's Strongest Man, or is there multiple world championships? Because kind of like that's the way obstacle course racing is right now. There's like each kind of brand has their own world championship, and then there's one like non-brand specific championship. So.
Yeah, there's one that like everyone considers the world championship, and then everyone else attaches their acronym to it, and then says it's their world championship.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer that. I get. I get it that there's politics and all of these things. It's so silly. Everyone's just trying to have fun, and it all gets political, I'm sure. But yeah, there's basically there always was just World's Strongest Man, and pretty much everything kind of fed into World's Strongest Man at some point. Then, of course, eventually things kind of branch off. There's amateur divisions were started in America, and that was called North American Strongman Championships, and that did huge things for the sport. Or North American Strongman, sorry, and that did huge things for the sport, and and it really served as a good feeder, and they developed a pro class, and then so it wasn't just like a good old boys club of I'm going to invite my friend, and then they're sitting there, this guy just keeps getting invited to Worlds, and there's someone stronger now, but he can't get in, but that helped, and that was at the point that was how it worked, and it's kind of getting a little bit back more to the good old boys club again, it seems. But yeah, but now. Giants Live is like the official qualifying series for World's Strongest Man. And then there's other, now like the Arnold has multiple, like the Arnold Classic in Ohio. That's one everyone thinks about. Now they have Arnolds everywhere, all over the place. I think there's one just in Brazil, which is this past weekend, which is like the Arnold South America. Then there's Arnold South Africa. There's Arnold Australia, etc. So they have a whole points division on those that was started this last year, and that's how you qualify for the Arnold World Championships, which is now called the Arnold World Series. There's Ultimate Strongman in the UK that had a World Championships. There's there's two amateur federations in America, United States Strongman and Strongman Corporation, which was formerly North American Strongman, and they both have national championships every year. So it's getting a little bit more divided, but I feel for the most part competition's good. Like as soon as another amateur federation started in America, I feel like more stuff started happening. On the other side, like a pro class for women got started, because you kind of have to. You have to stay above and offer more incentive. And it got kind of stagnant there for a while because, if you're the only game in town, it's easy to, myself just running my own business. Like no one else is reporting on, the results at World's Strongest Man like I do on my website. It's pretty easy to go, I can just do that in the morning, but now there's more websites doing that. I'm like, I got to make sure I do that right away. It just keeps you on your toes a little bit. But for the most part, there's the big shows are the Arnolds and Giants Live / Worlds for the most part. And then, here, if anyone's wants to do like a local contest, just see if anything's in their area. Show up, whatever seems fun, do that one. I feel even I'm a state chair for California for Strongman Corporation. I tell people just compete wherever they feel's fun. You don't have to play politics and be way on one side. Once you start playing that game, you're losing the reason why you probably picked the sport in the first place. Just keep it fun.
Yeah. If
it's not your job.
So for people coming into Strongman, is there in obstacle course racing? There's been a big push. Obstacle course racing world championships drug test people. Spartan World Championship has been saying they're going to start drug testing people, but I don't think they've actually done it. Is there drug testing in Strongman, or is there a natural division? Like I know bodybuilding has like specifically like natural shows that like you're not supposed to take drugs and go into it.
Sure.
Is it similar in Strongman, or is it just kind of like we don't test and we don't ask, or kind of what's the deal with that?
Yeah, I feel a lot of sports, like it seems like what you're ending at is they said that they're going to start testing. I feel like they kind of have to say that just so they can say that they test. But what sport actually wants to find out, like, who really wants to, like, find out that Santa Claus isn't real, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I don't think anyone really does at some point. Like, I think everyone was, for the most part, happier when Lance Armstrong was just out winning races and, you know, raising money for cancer than now, or, you know, it was just a funner fairy tale. But in my opinion, professional athletes are professional athletes, and you have to do what it takes to be a professional. There's a Mariusz Pudzianowski quote, you know, one of the greatest strongmen of all time, and they asked him about drugs on sport, and he said, if you want to learn the secrets of the church, become a priest. If you want to learn the secrets of an athlete, if you want to learn the secrets of sport, become an athlete. But at World's Strongest Man, I know that they test for drugs, as in like recreational drugs. It wasn't
didn't Mariusz Pudzianowski get eliminated one year for like cocaine or something?
Yes, he did. Sort of
stimulant.
Yeah. It's a crazy world. You wouldn't think that is, but yeah, people are kind of intense. So yeah, I think that was 2006 when they're in the Bahamas. I mean, when you're in the Bahamas, what are you gonna do, right? But yeah, he did. So there's, as far as, you know, when people talk, you know, performance-enhancing drugs, what they're talking about, you know, it's called the World's Strongest Man.
Right.
But, yeah, there's been natural federations, there's been a natural world championship, but it almost ends up being more, it's like, in my opinion, and people probably get mad if I say this, but I feel like drug testing is just another way to control athletes in some aspect. Like, you always see, like, in baseball, this could be my conspiracy theory, you know, conspiracy hat going, but it feels like if some athlete's, like, up for, like, a big arbitration number or has been, like, vocal about other things they don't like in the sport, all of a sudden, after years, now, 3 months later, they get popped for a drug test when they're, you know, butting heads with the front office or something. But, yeah, I feel like you should have a look after the athlete's safety, and that if someone wants to be a recreational athlete, that they shouldn't think that they have to do the same things that someone makes it their life doing would do. But, yeah, basically there's been world championships that were quote-unquote natural in Turkey and stuff, and from what I remember, it was just like people had to go up and, like, sign a paper that said they were natural. It's like, it's almost, a lot of sports and federations do just enough to save face, and you can see once sports get past that point where they're actively trying to catch people, how different it is. Like, how long was the UFC drug testing before now every other week someone's testing positive? Like a decade, they were saying they drug tested, but, you know, they weren't, like the only way a sport can ever be somewhat close to clean is if you're basically hounding these people an athlete day in and day out, like the UFC does with WADA now. Yeah. And in my opinion, that's kind of ridiculous. But
I mean, cycling is it's like a witch hunt in cycling. You know, they're going after people, and then people are still finding ways to beat the system, and it's been going on.
People always will.
It's been going on for years, so.
Yeah, it almost ends up. Then the entire sport becomes who can stay ahead of the other person, and like we're seeing now with like weightlifting, it's like that's how, you know, they're saving samples for 10 years, and I'm sorry if I went up gold medal and that was on television, you're not taking away that moment and that accomplishment from me 10 years later.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure there's a lot of other people that have a different viewpoint from me, but that's mine. And I don't feel that in being around sports, the person who's taken the most drugs isn't the one who wins. From my you know, anecdotal evidence of just watching sport is I feel when you think that's your mindset I think a lot of people can have a nice short career, but not a long one, because at the end of the day, a healthy body performs well. And if you're going past the point where supplementation is exceeded and excessive, that it's going to cause health issues, then your body breaks down eventually. So you might do good for 2 to 3 years, but the greatest of all time are the people that have done this for decades and stayed at a high level. Like, look at Zydrunas Savickas. He competed in World's Strongest Man in '99, and he's going after his 5th title this year. So
he's ridiculous.
Yeah. So
I'm fairly. I don't know. I've always been clean or natural. I've competed in a couple of natural bodybuilding competitions, and I just didn't like you were saying earlier. It didn't feel like they were. It felt like they were just doing barely enough to say like, yeah, we're natural.
Yeah, that's my point.
And
yeah,
I would be on stage with guys with like gynecomastia and like just some dudes that were like enormous, and I was like, are we serious? Like, this guy is clearly doping next to me. Like, I don't know. If you want to go in like the NPC, which is like essentially the undrug tested bodybuilding federation, then go for it. But like, I don't know why. I feel like some guys would purposely go into the natural one just to win a contest. I guess I'm not sure. It's very bizarre to me.
Yeah, the human how the human mind works and for how it draws motivation. It's interesting. People do a lot of things for a plastic trophy and just to say they did something, when in reality it's like I have always felt like I wanted to compete at the highest level I could and see what I was made of. So I wouldn't take a easier road and find a way to skirt the system in that way. And I don't think if a sport is drug tested, especially if there's another avenue and another federation that just doesn't care what you do, that you should. But I feel like it almost kind of ruins the fun of a sport when people are just, once a lot of money gets involved and it's at a high level, when there's just it's more all the news is the witch hunt on who's doing what instead of the accomplishments the athletes are doing.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I always say that strongman's the only honest sport.
So are there any pro strongmen that make a living just off competing, or does everyone have like a side job? Like I know in obstacle course racing we have I'd say the very very tip top of the sport. There's probably about 5 to 10 people who don't have a side job, and even them, I would kind of consider them having a side job because a lot of them have like online training businesses and stuff like that. So, are there any pro strongman? Yeah, are there any pro strongman who like all I do is compete and I have sponsors and I don't train anyone or run websites or anything like something like that?
Yeah, I'd say that it's probably roughly the same. A good dozen or so guys, 5 to 10, that have made enough impact on the sport that they're able to have sponsors. But again, that's still a job. You have to make appearances here. You have obligations. You have to do photo shoots, etc. But yeah, probably 5 to 10 guys. Eddie Hall's made a good amount of money. I think I don't like to speak for how much other people make. Brian Shaw, I will say people are full-time. They don't have like a 9-to-5 job or are constantly pushing online training or something, like a service. But yeah, it's like Eddie Hall, Brian Shaw, Hafthor Bjornsson, some guys out there. Zydrunas owns a gym, but he's made some decent money on the sport. Like I said, Robert Oberst, he just has sponsors and does stuff, so he doesn't have a 9-to-5 job, but it's possible. I mean, but the vast majority of people, even if they're a quote unquote pro, it's probably costing them more money to compete in the sport than they're going to make.
Yeah, I saw Eddie Hall's documentary. I think it's just called Strongman on Netflix.
That's Strongman Eddie.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty good. I know I listened to the first couple episodes of your podcast, and I know you, your co-host has some mixed feelings.
Oh, they're good friends. Yeah, if you go back the first episodes, right when Eddie, they were kind of right at the same level, and they're going to compete against each other at the log lift world championship. So we had fun back and forth with that, and it gave the podcast a good hit. Like, I've never hit numbers again since like the third episode when Eddie Hall called us out and called us two rednecks in California talking shit on him, and thankfully posted the link. That was nice of him. But yeah, no, they're friends. It's they got a good banner going, and that's what you have to be a professional. You got to, people want to complain about they're getting more money in the sport or getting more people involved, but you got to put on a show, and it has to transcend. It has to go above just what your performance was. The showman, or if you're a showman and you got a good personality that draws people to you, you're gonna be more successful in any niche sport monetarily. You can go back from anywhere from, the UFC to Strongman or anything. The people remember or even looking back at Strongman, people remember John Paul Sigmarsson, et cetera, because, he was loud, or Kazmaier, he was shouting, "I'm the Viking" at everyone and doing theatrics and all that, versus, Magnus Magnuson won just as many times, but he's still around. He's a little more soft-spoken. More people know who Eddie Hall is than, his countrymate Lawrence Chalet, even though Lawrence has also placed third at Worlds, I believe, and has won Europe's, where Eddie hasn't. So, Eddie's, I think, more accomplished and stronger at this point, but he just has something that draws people to him, and he also works on that.
Hobie Call, one of I'd say the best American obstacle course racer ever so far, and possibly one of the best in the world. And he won Spartan World Championship this last year at age 39. He's big into that. He'll call people out before races and make bold predictions like, I'm gonna race the 5 biggest races this year and win every one. So I think he's got a similar mindset, like trying to drum up some drama, on the social media channels, which it drives people to the live feeds and to the broadcast on NBC. So
we're talking about it right now.
Yeah,
it's the Conor McGregor. Is he the best fighter in the world? He's damn good, but why did he transcended the sport into popular culture? It's because something about him, and he works on his media. Yeah, he said in an interview, which I try to tell the people. He said, in mixed martial arts, you have your different skills you need to work on. You got your jiu-jitsu, your boxing, your wrestling, your media. It's equal. Like, if you want to be successful as a professional in the sport, then you have to take it, and you have to take that into account. I talk to people all the time how to, I got not a big following, but more so than I think any other lightweight strongman, because it's something I worked on. And it's also, you can't be fake about it though. Like, people, if you have to just amplify your natural personality already, or whatever you're about, and just accentuate that. You can't just, if you're if you're not a shit talker, you can't just start talking shit everywhere. It's going to seem weird. But, you got to just have fun with it. And my advice when people always ask me how to make money in the sport is I tell them to stay in school. That's probably a better way to go. They have more options than I did.
Nice. So kind of one more question, and then we'll wrap this up.
Sure.
So are there, when obstacle course racing, one of the things we're dealing with is people talk about pro cards or the possibility of issuing pro cards, or is there quote unquote pro strongman? Like, do you have a physical card that says I'm a pro strongman, or is it just I hit a certain status or got invited to a certain competition, or I make X amount of my living on strongman, so I consider myself pro now?
Yeah, there are physical cards. Strongman Corporation runs. They implemented that. In I think the early 2000s, or maybe a little earlier, where they had that division where you could win pro cards at the contest I was just at. I think 3 pro cards were given away, and then you're eligible to compete in pro contests. It gets a little, to sum it up, yes, there are pro cards, and also, yes, there are other people that just compete in pro, quote unquote level shows because they've accomplished things and kind of circumvented the system, because it's not there's not one sanctioning body over it.
Okay.
I feel like there's a good room for both. Like, it's kind of they instituted like a pro strongwoman class last year, and since then and that incentive really excelled the women's side of thing. It seems like it's growing really quick, and just how much stronger the women got so much quicker when there's that like carrot dangling it just it made it explode. So I think it's good in that aspect, but in my mind, I'm like, you were all already competing at that high level against each other, and being able to market the show as a pro class, I think, has drawn in a little bit more money for sponsors. Like there was $10,000 for just a show at a random Europa that was put on at the Charlotte Europa this past weekend. So I think that helps, but I think you be careful what you wish for, though. The more you kind of, it almost makes it more political in a sense if you are, in a sport and you're dividing it like that. And instead of like, you look at CrossFit and how successful they are, they don't have a pro class. They just have a system of you have to get through these steps, and it's gonna, and anyone has that same shot, and and it makes it so it doesn't matter if you're Rich Froning or whoever. If you can't still compete at that level, you don't get a chance to play on the big stage. Likewise, you could be Joe Schmo off the couch and theoretically win the CrossFit Games and not even been in it last year. So there just needs to be some filter system to get to that level. I feel is kind of a better way to get it and inviting it. But in my class as a lightweight 175, it's the only division that still doesn't have a pro class. So I'll get hate on the internet because people say I talk with authority on the sport when I'm not a pro. It's like there is no such thing.
Yeah, for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sit here and defend my accomplishments because it's silly. But I will also say I'm one of the only ones that's ever gotten paid to go to a contest. I'm probably the only 175 I can think of that ever got not paid to win a contest, paid to show up to contests. So you can take that however you want, in my mind. So people just want a little card to stick in their wallet, I guess. I don't know. It's an accomplishment. It's an achievement if you do that in our sport, and I think it's great. And there is good, but there's no free lunch. There's upsides and downsides each way.
Yeah, I know. I've talked to triathletes before that that are now like into obstacle course racing. They've talked about some of the negative aspects of having a governing body like USA Triathlon kind of overwatching, the sport, and how it's not all basically. I think that's a good point you brought up. Like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. When people want certain sanctioning bodies or pro cards or stuff like that, there's good and negative that comes with that. I actually I wrote an article that I haven't actually. By the time this comes out, it'll probably be up on Mud Run Guide about the Olympics and kind of highlighting a lot of the quote unquote what I think consider negative aspects that the Olympics would bring to obstacle course racing. It would bring a lot of positive too, but I think people just need to be aware that there's not everything's going to be perfect if that change happens. So.
No, yeah, it would definitely change the sport, any sport, that doesn't already have a tradition of it. It's going to make it more clean and it kind of disinfects everything, and I think that's one of the reasons why we get attracted to a niche sport in the first place. I'm not trying to say like keep everything underground and silly, but it's kind of like people like Strongman because it's the freak show. That's what it is. I mean, Eddie Hall came out to Europe's Strongest Man and with a gimp mask on and dressed in chains. A lot of people thought that was too much, but then other people liked it, and there's sold out stadium with 11,000 people in it. So, and then that's an Olympic sport. You're not going to be able to get that if, there's all these, there needs to be some standardization, but I think it needs to stay a little loose. I'll be interested to see that article, though. I bet it's kind of funny how many overlaps there are between, the two communities.
Yeah, I think people listening to this will draw a lot out of our conversation and just kind of hearing your side of the sport and hearing its development. I mean, I think you could argue obstacle course racing was a TV show first, too, because, I mean, Ninja Warrior's been around for... American Ninja Warrior's been around for 9 years, but, you know, Sasuke, the Japanese version, has been around for whatever, I don't know, 20. And that's essentially obstacle course racing in its shortest form. So, I mean, the obstacles are touching each other versus, you know, now they're... it would be considered kind of long course, what we do. For the most part, you know, 3 to 13 miles for most of them, and then at the extreme end of the spectrum, 8 to 24 hours in length. So
so if you're trying to describe to someone what you do, you know, just someone at a like random barbecue or you know, you're stuck on a plane and someone asks you what you do, you probably, have you ever seen American Ninja Warriors? Probably the way you go, I'd imagine. Just like guys say, hey, have you ever seen those big guys pulling a truck and throwing kegs over a bar on World's Strongest Man? So you have to think outside of your sport, and if you're already in a niche community and you're so wrapped up in it, you have to think about outside. You have to think about the first moment that you were aware of this thing and what you drew to it, and also what the outside world identifies it with. So if you're thinking about all these little teeny things, and they're just thinking, you know, I want to see some guy scale a giant wall and some guy shout at him in Japanese. That was entertaining. So you probably want to keep the sport more like that, because that's why it even started in the first place. So people want to see, like, I want to see someone, you know, running with a car on their back. I couldn't believe this guy named Magnus from Iceland did that. And then this other guy, he was holding a freaking sword up. If you go to the Olympics, they're going to, you know, it's not going to be a sword. It's going to be this, you know, standard implement that tests the same thing, but it doesn't have that visual appeal. So you can almost, and it could end up killing the sport in a way, because you're just placating for the people that are already indoctrinated, and you're not drawing in any new eyeballs because the thing that drew you in possibly went away, and you don't even realize it.
Yep. I think that'll wrap it up. Any last shout outs you want to give to anyone, or brands, or people?
Yeah, I think if anyone is interested in the sport of strongman, you know, I run the website startingstrongman.com, and we have a whole store and on, you know, just with products for the sport, along with just information on what happens, and of course the Strong Talk podcast on iTunes, where we interview different athletes in the sport. And that's pretty much it. It's Starting Strongman on all social media, and, you know, I'm Kalle Beck on all social media. And I also, if anyone wants more programming, I do programming for Complete Human Performance, which is CompleteHumanPerformance.com, which they also have some, you know, OCR athletes on staff, and we kind of jointly, you know, trade information with each other or clients. Like if someone wanted to do some strongman, then go do it, you know, like a OCR, and kind of mix it up back and forth. We can kind of come up with like a, you know, hybrid plan. It's, you know, hybrid training. So that would probably interest people. And the one thing I want to, as far as approaching implements, and that, you know, actually give you actual training advice, other than talking about politics and all the nitty gritty stuff that people like, but just leave you with a little bit of training information is, if there is like odd obstacles, you know, strongman style training in some of your races, even if they're not heavy, just knowing basic form on the lifts, even at like the highest level, with like how we do it at Strongman, I feel is just you know, by being more proficient in the movement, it might not seem like it right away, but it's going to make you you're not going to use as much effort to do it, so you're going to be, you know, even fresher than to go for your run after you complete that obstacle, etc. So just learn some basic technique on the lifts, and we have, you know, a YouTube channel, and on, you know, Starting Strongman YouTube, and on our website with information on those lifts, I think would be very beneficial. And it kind of helps, like, you know, if you know how to move an odd object and you kind of learn leverages and hand positions, then it you know, like when I have to move, I'm pretty good at moving a couch, so it has some real world applications as well.
Awesome. Well, Kalle, thanks again for coming on the show. I know this past year, World's Toughest Mudder actually broadcast their championship event on Christmas Day, which is normally around the same time that World's Strongest Man is on. So I feel like we may be competing for the same audience at some point.
Yeah, probably a bit, but I have the mindset of there's a giant pie and everyone can have a slice, and as long as you just keep growing that, it doesn't get you grow everything as a whole, it doesn't get smaller. I never see anything a competition, and that's how people should also view different federations, this or that, in strongman or in any niche sport. Just think outside of it and how to grow it as a whole, and everyone will be happy in the end, and everyone will prosperous as well.
What was kind of funny was when they announced when they announced World's Toughest Mudder would be on Christmas Day. I had a couple of my friends online be like, "Well, who's gonna watch it on Christmas Day? That's a terrible time.
Everyone,
no one watches." And I was like, me and my dad watch World's Strongest Man every year for several years on Christmas Day. I that's a very specific memory I have, stretching back several years. And it's a freak show, right? So dudes,
sure.
Like you said, dudes are lifting cars, and we're for World's Toughest Mudder, it's a freak show, but in a different way. I mean, people are running around for 24 hours, climbing over obstacles in wetsuits and jumping in ice baths. The first time not the first time, but at one point I was talking to one of my runner friends, and I was like, yeah, I do a 24-hour obstacle course race. And he's like, well, what's your strategy? And I was like, I don't understand. And I was like, I run and climb over obstacles. He's like, well, you can't do it for 24 hours. And I was like, I can, and I do. I just keep moving. I'm not moving fast, but I'm physically moving for 24 hours. And I sometimes forget, again, you get into your sport, you get kind of isolated, and I forget to normal people, that is very, very bizarre. You are at the freak end of the spectrum of doing things to your body. So it's just, like I said, niche sport, far on. You guys are far on the strength side. We're far on, at least for that event, far on the endurance side. But
yeah, I think there's the similarity too, is that it's non-standardized. Where weightlifting and let's say Olympic marathon are very on the two far ends, just being non-standard and having different challenges and constantly changing, and having variety makes it seems like the OCR and the strongman are kind of in the same group with that. But yeah, you just you have to remember how impactful that is for think about when you're a kid. That means other kids they're watching with their parents, and they I know when I was a kid, when I watched World's Strongest Man as a kid, I was small, and I was like, I just want to be. All I could ever think about was being big and strong one day, and it's just a blessing that I was able to find that in my life. So, and it pretty much it's turned into my career on growing that just somehow, some way. So you have to think how impactful that one moment can be on someone who's 8, 9, 10, younger. They remember that, so. It's pretty cool. If you just have to keep looking at your sport through the eyes of an 8-year-old boy that's seen something amazing that they didn't know was a reality. It seems like something that's only in comic books, and if you can keep that look on your own sport. If you're listening to a podcast that's specific to a niche sport, that means you're pretty entrenched in it. So. Just look outside of it with that fresh look, and you'll probably enjoy it some more.
All right, well, awesome. I think we'll leave it at that. The looking at your sport through the eyes of a 8-year-old kid. So I think that's an awesome way to look at things. And again, Kalle, thanks again for coming on the podcast. Go check out his website if you're interested in strongman or just some hybrid training or just mixing up your OCR. Go check that out, and we will see you next week. And that's it from Strength and Speed.
Thank you.